What's up, everybody? Welcome to Saturday, October 18th. It's 2 p.m., so that means we are live every Saturday and Sunday, 2 p.m. Saturday is always educational on craft and sometimes business. And then, of course, every Sunday we do the Write With Me series. Today is about beginnings, middles, and ends. That's right. Today's lesson is all about discovering the hidden patterns that are absolutely within every narrative. So we're going to talk about, we're going to show on the screen and explain what narratives are. We're going to explain how to look at your narrative and what all beginnings, middles, and ends should have. But before we get into that, as always, we have a poll. That's right, we have a poll. What slows your narrative when you don't mean it to? All right, so today's choices is basically too much setup, wandering thoughts, dialogue drags, or descriptions for description's sakes. Let me know by voting in the vote today. We will talk about that at the end of the hour, or maybe when the video's over. Hello, hello. What is up, my friend? How are you today? Yes. We are getting into the groove. We are getting into the groove. All right. Now, and by the way, SB, thank you again for joining us and having some fun today. All right. With that said, let's get into it. We got to share the screen. Share the screen. Share the screen. Yeah, share the screen. All right. All right. If you have any questions, by the way, while I'm going over this, please feel free to ask. Do not hesitate. We are here to explore. All right. I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. We're going to create some, just so you could see. Can you see everything? No, it's still too big. It's still too big. All right. I'll just have to show. I'll show. All right. Okay. All right, so today we're going to be talking about beginnings, middles, and ends, and what you should be doing for beginnings, what you should be doing for middles, and how you should be resolving in the ends. Now, this is not a lesson that's just about, hey, you got to have a beginning, a middle, and end. We're actually going to go into details not only about what should go into the beginnings of not only your acts, but your sections and also plot points, as well as the middles and ends. But then we're going to give an example. I'm going to do a real-time example. I'm going to show you how to basically just brainstorm ideas, but at the same time, how you can look at your narrative when you feel like certain things aren't happening. Because if the beginning isn't setting something up, and the middle isn't challenging, nor is the end resolving, you'll have the tools by the end of this video to understand how to adjust and assimilate. So let's get into that. All right, so to start off, first and foremost, beginnings. Now, if you notice the colors, I've highlighted all elements of a beginning. All right, now this seems complicated, so do not worry about looking at it in that way. I'm going to just teach you and explain it all one by one. Okay. Let me get this off the screen so we can see more. Okay. Now, before I go into what a beginning is, what a middle is, and what an end is, let me just show you how the 27 plot point outline actually helps you establish a rhythm and flow to your narrative in a way where you can look at these beats, whether it be an act, a section, or a plot point, and say to yourself, am I accomplishing the elements and the needs of that beginning, middle, or end? So just as a quick overview, before I go down, I'm going to scroll down and we're going to go over it in actual physical detail. Okay? All beginnings are going to set things up. And as you can see, Act 1 sets up your narrative, right? And then each act has a beginning, has a middle, Section 2, and an end, Section 3. But as you can see, each section also has a beginning, okay? It has a middle, and it has an end. So that's important to know for when we're going over what a beginning, middle, and end is, and when we're going over the lesson as we move forward, and how to relate it to the 27 plot point outline, or just, if you're just pantsing in general, it's how to really approach your narrative, because everything should be doing something. But the reason I'm showing you this on the screen first is to set you up with a visual, so when we go into the discussion, you can start putting into things. And then we're going to go back to this, and we're going to kind of reallocate how we look at it, okay? Hey, welcome. Good day. Good day, Gov. How's it going? How you hanging? Well, I'm hanging pretty well, my friend. We're hanging pretty well. All right, so with that said, I'm going to go down. Hello to Thomas's beard. Welcome, Nicole. So I'm going to scroll them down, and we're going to get into it, and then we're going to come back to this visual, and we're going to kind of go over it a little bit more. All right. So I have this on the screen just so you could read and stuff like that, or take notes while I'm discussing. So we're going to bring up stuff, and then I'm going to go a little deeper into it. And just in case this is not big enough for you, let's see if we can get that nice and big. Yeah. All right. Actually, you know what? Let me do this. Let me do this. 15. Because that's what we do. All right. Now that's pretty big. Okay. You can see that clearly, right? Excellent. Okay. Let's get into it. All right. Whenever you're looking at the beginning of something, whether it's an act, a section, plot point, if it's a scene or a chapter, you have to bring in context. Context is king. Without context, everything else is confusing. We cannot, as readers, understand what's going on, who's in the scene, how it's playing out, what are the goals, etc., etc. But context is going to help you establish the foundation of what it is you're working on. So whether it is an act, a section, or a plot point, a scene, etc., you need to set up the protagonist's narrative world. Now, these things can be, but are not limited to, the lie the character believes. Okay? Now, a lie could just be that they believe that they are a highly capable swordsman, all right, or a swordswoman. Okay, but that is the lie they believe. They think they are capable, or they believe that they understand the world. It's as simple as Jon Snow taking on the wall, and he's going to go to the wall because that's what the Starks do, and he's a bastard. And it's that simple. That's the lie he believes, that everything is simple. Everything is in its place, and we have to do what we have to do, and that is honor, right? So that's his lie he believes, right? But the other thing you need to set up in all beginnings, whether it is an act, a section, a plot point, a chapter, or a scene, is the rules of that moment, the context of the rules. But Thomas, what are rules? That's a great question. Thank you for asking. The rules are whatever determines the situation or circumstances. So, for example, if we are in a sci-fi narrative, Act 1 needs to set up what the technology is. Not literally on page 1. It doesn't need to do that in chapter 1. But you have the entirety of Act 1 to set up the rules of the world. So if your Act 1 is 20 chapters, that means you could spread out the technology and the understanding of that technology over the course of 20 chapters. Now, the other rules of the world are their philosophies or their cultures or the species or their weaponry or whatever the case is. You're basically building the world. The other rules that you need to establish within the beginning, whether it is an act, a section, or a plot point, or a scene, or a chapter, okay, is the goal of that world, of that act. Because every act, section, plot point, and chapter or scene have its own goals. It'll have its own goals, it'll have its own challenges, and it'll have its own resolutions, okay? The only thing is the grand scale of it. Acts, just for the record, okay, are connected to the full narrative, ultimately the central conflict. It is the big picture of it all. Sections are breaking up acts into 3 beats, which is a beginning, a middle, and end. That's right. Each act has its own beginning, middle, and end, just like all the acts create a beginning, middle, and end for the full narrative. Now, each section has 3 plot points, and believe it or not, that means each section has a beginning, middle, and end. So at any given time, you're either setting up the full narrative over the course of the act, or you're setting up the act within a section, or you're setting up the section within a plot point. And it's the same thing with a scene or a chapter. When you start a chapter off, you need to set up the rules of the world, the lie that may be believed within that chapter or scene, okay? You need to set up who your characters are. Now, not all of them. Remember, you're allowed to add new information and or characters within the beginning or the first half of Act 2. But usually you want to at least mention at some level, either whether subtly or incognito, the great bad, the antagonist, or somebody that will pop up later on after the midpoint conflict. The point is, you need to mention something about them. You don't have to say their name. You don't have to say whatever. But for a good example would be, let's say in Act 1, we learn over the course of 20 chapters that one of the main characters, not even the protagonist, just one of the main characters, okay, keeps bringing up or talks about how they graduated from Duke, okay? And then the midpoint conflict, they learn that they need to understand a very specific field that is not really studied. Like no one really focuses on, whatever. Let's say it's quantum physics, but in this narrative, no one really studies quantum physics except for a very small group of people, right? Well, that means after the midpoint conflict, that character that had established their relationship with Duke can now be like, I think I know somebody that would be perfect for this. And then they meet up with a character, and then they shake hands, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you became a professor at Duke. Like when we first went there, all you would do is just party. And it's like, well, times have changed, blah, 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 right? But if you go back to the beginning of the story in Act 1, you can see the seeded proof that this character always existed by the stories that the character is talking about within Duke, etc., etc. So you're connecting the dots to the reveal. It isn't just that they know somebody, okay? The other thing is, whenever you're starting the beginnings of stuff, whether it's an act, section, plot point, you want to worry about subplot threads. Now, keep in mind, you're allowed to bring in subplots in the beginning or the first half of Act 2, but it is important to think about subplots, whether it's in a scene, a chapter, or whatever. And the reason is because you want to start seeding as much information as possible within your first act. The more you set up, the more you can challenge, and then the more it can pay off in the resolution at the end. However, this does not mean exposition dumps. Remember, if your first act is 20 chapters, that means you have 20 chapters to spread out this information. And then finally, the last two is circumstance / set the status quo. So every beginning, whether it's the acts, right? So Act 1 will set up the status quo of the narrative world. It'll set up the circumstances of the narrative world and the protagonist. Just as the first section of every act will reestablish new circumstances, will reestablish the new set of status quos, just as the first plot point of every section will reestablish the new circumstance, will reestablish the status quo. Now, what does that mean? Circumstances mean that they are in a situation. That situation has a problem that needs to be solved. And where are they starting foundationally to approach that circumstance? Oh, this is a good question. So in terms of my saga, I should break up the acts in books of 3 to get 12 books, or should I consider a 9-book saga and call book 5 the middle? Oh, that's a really great, okay, all right. So what you're doing is you're expanding, and by the way, that is a good way to look at the narrative over the course of a saga. But before I answer this, okay, just remember, SB, every book within a saga or a series must be self-contained, though it connects to the larger, bigger picture. And each book is sort of like a zoomed-in micro-analysis of the greater narrative of the saga. With that said, this is something I did for the epic fantasy I'm working on. I made book 1 basically section 1 of the 27 plot points. So it is setting up the ordinary world of the full saga, but at the same time it does have a conclusion. And the reason is, and by the way, so you can do what you're saying if you wanted to, but allow each book to maintain its own cohesion, okay? But with that said, so if I go up real quick, so Act 1, Section 1, this should be its own contained story within Act 1, because plot point 1 is going to set up the circumstances for whatever Section 1's problem is or situation. Plot point 2 will explore that problem or conflict, and then plot point 3 will resolve that conflict or problem while moving the plot forward. Then when you get to section 2 of Act 1, section 2 is now the main conflict of Act 1's narrative through line. But what do you got to do? In plot point 4, you have to set up the circumstances and status quo of that disrupted world. Then you have to challenge that setup and status quo, and then you have to resolve it, and so forth and so forth. So we're gonna go into that a little deeper as we get closer and closer to the end. But I just want to give you a little look-see, a peek into it. Okay. Now, as an example, William Turner in the Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. William Turner's lie, by the way, is pirates are evil bad. They are evil and bad, and you have to live honorably, and there's a certain way to life, and blah, blah, blah. Now, of course, you may be saying, no, he likes Elizabeth, too. Well, that's a subplot. His relationship, believe it or not, his relationship with the blacksmith is technically a subplot that sort of like begins and ends before you know it. But his relationship or his complications with Elizabeth is a plot point. But his main character arc is that pirates are evil bad. And why is that his main character arc? Because it drives the narrative forward. It is literally the central conflict. And that is why the prologue of the Pirates of the Caribbean starts off with William Turner knocked out, taken out of the water. The ship he was on with his family, his father, whatever, was destroyed. Not that he was on a ship that was destroyed. He was with his father, bootstraps, and they destroyed a ship, and he fell overboard. And so that sets it all up. So everything is about that kind of thread. That's how you look at it. Okay. So that's important. You got to. Those are the kind of things you got to set up in your beginnings. Okay. Now, if you're looking at a chapter, it's the same thing. When you start a chapter, who's in the chapter? Are there any subplots within this chapter that are going to be moving forward? Well, you got to set that up. What are the circumstances of that chapter? Circumstances are, what is the problem to be solved potentially? What is their issue? Like, why are we here in the scene? And why are the characters here in the scene? That is the circumstances. Are they in a tavern? Are they on the moon? Are they, I don't know. Are they biology? Like they're inside a human body, and they're just maybe they're just brain, they're emotional thoughts, and that's, what is that, inside of me, whatever it's called, I forget. The Dreamswork movie. And then even in the chapter, what is the status quo? You always want to start them somewhere, and you want to at least allow it to be established where you can go from there. The status quo is so important. It's as important as the other elements, because a chapter can't go anywhere if we don't at least set up where it is. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give all the details. It doesn't mean you have to give massive exposition. It doesn't mean that you have to stop the narrative and go, so-and-so's here, so-and-so. You allow it to move through behavior, through narrative flow, and you have the whole beginning to set that up. Now, I will be honest with you. Again, just like a narrative where you can add new information in the first half of your second act, you can do that in chapters too. So if you look at a chapter as its own full arc, which you should, okay, you have up to the middle, basically the midpoint conflict of that chapter to continue to add information. So keep that in mind. That's just a little extra sauce of knowledge. All right, let me bring this down. Bring that down. All right, middles. Oh, by the way, if anyone has any questions on what I was talking about, or you have questions that pertain to your own stuff, feel free to ask questions. Additionally, we do have a poll. What slows your narrative when you don't mean it to? And we have the choices are in the poll. We have too much setup or context, wandering thoughts, dialogue drags, and descriptions for description's sake. We will talk about that at the end of the hour and really go a little deeper into it. But with that said, let's keep going. All right, middles need to establish a conflict. What does that mean? Well, whether it's an act, section, plot point, chapter, whatever, okay, it's going to introduce new rules. Because what that means is we need to reframe what was set up in Act 1 or Section 1 or Plot Point 1. All right, so whatever was set up in, I'll make this easier for the eye, beginning, okay, you have to reframe what's set up in the beginning. So whatever you set up in the beginning stages, whether you're setting up in Act 1, whether you're setting it up in Section 1, whether you're setting it up in the first plot point of that section, whether you're setting up a chapter, right? Whatever it is you set up, it is in the conflict that you will push back on the positions that were discovered through the characters, which means what they believe, okay? You will push back on the old rules, okay, and reframe those rules. What does that mean? Let's go into that. So if let's do a chapter first. So let's say in the beginning of the chapter, okay, which is not what we're talking about, but we're talking about it. Let's set up the beginning. In the beginning of a chapter, okay, a character gets a bill, and it says final notice, and if they don't pay it, it's going to start the foreclosure on their house, okay? Now, you might be saying, but Thomas, that sounds like a conflict. But because it is in the setup, it is it is their status quo, and it is their circumstance. It is also setting up the problem to fix. But remember, a conflict is what pushes back on their ability to fix the problem. Okay? So, here it comes. So now, in the middle of the chapter, they get a phone call. Okay? Now we have to reframe the information we just set up is they got their final notice. So they get a phone call in just out of nowhere. And it's their brother. And their brother says, "Hey, listen, I'm selling our dad's house. So, I could give you some of the money if you need it, but I'm going to need you to come to Arkansas." Right? And they're like, "But I'm in New York right now. I'm dealing with the foreclosure on my house. Is there a way I could sign it, through the mail, or could we help it that way? Could you send me maybe just send me what you think you're going to get? Just send me my portion," right? That's creating the conflict. We're pushing back. They can't leave. They have to deal with the foreclosure. They have no money. Here's a chance to actually get money. But if they go outside their comfort zone for that, it's going to cause more issues because they're going to have to say, "Hey, I can't deal with the courts right now because I got to go help my brother sell the house." All right? We're pushing and reframing. The reframe is there is potential for money. Okay? The stress that the foreclosure brings on and the complications of claiming that money, right? All those things would reframe what we learned in the beginning of that chapter, all right? Now, if it was an act, you could do the same thing. Act 1, the entirety of Act 1 could be setting up this person living at a house, and we also learn that the brother is dealing with their final parent having passed away, right? But that had already kind of happened, and they're dealing with that. They're cleaning out the house, they're doing all that stuff. Another thing you might set up in Act 1 is that the main protagonist also just lost their job. Okay? Those are all status quos. But it is in Act 2 where now the brother says, "Hey, you got to come out here and deal with some paperwork, and I'm going to sell the house and all that." The other thing is they finally get the foreclosure notice, and now they have to deal with the foreclosure notice. So that's the brilliance, by the way, of the 27 plot point outline, is any kind of narrative thread you create that has a beginning, middle, and end. It just means, am I going to allow it to play over the course of a full act? Well, I could spread that out. Am I going to allow it to play over the course of a section or a plot point or even a chapter? And that's how you look at narrative just in general. You're either looking at a microcosm that is going to affect the bigger picture, or you're taking that and you're going to just stretch it out, and you're going to say, how do I build on little pieces to ultimately create a long-form narrative, all right? Now, also keep in mind, in the middles of your narratives, you can add new characters and information. I would recommend not adding new information beyond the midpoint conflict of the full narrative arc. So basically, once you hit the midpoint conflict of the main narrative, the central conflict, do not add new information beyond that midpoint conflict unless you've already seeded information previously to the midpoint conflict that earns the reveal. Otherwise, you run into Deus Ex Machina. Otherwise, you run into contrived relevance. It's stuff that doesn't pay off. When it comes to chapters, and sections and stuff like that, you can play around with that a little bit more. And the reason is, ultimately, it's not influencing the long form of the narrative. However, if you want to have a tighter narrative structure, maintain that rule. So basically, if we go back up here, let's say we're just dealing with section 1. So section 1 up to the midpoint of plot point 2, you add information that establishes the circumstances, establishes the problem, gives us information that could potentially lead to a solution from the midpoint of plot point 2 to the end of plot point 3. And what that does is it helps the reader learn enough, then see it get challenged, and now the second half of that narrative piece is all focused on solutions and not necessarily re-educating you or showing you new information. And just for the record, if you know the 27 plot point outline, usually the resolution is an immediate response to, so it doesn't really give you time to sit there and mull over information that you learned. However, the setup or the start of the next section does. It usually slows down the narrative on purpose. It reestablishes the new circumstances, the new status quo, right? And that creates the rhythm. So your stakes are always rising. You're always keeping the narrative moving. But even still, you have to slow things down to add context. All right. And then for the William Turner thing, William Turner, okay, in the middle, or let's say Act 2, the entirety of Act 2 in Pirates of the Caribbean, William Turner learns a few things. Jack reveals that William's father was a pirate and a good man, and if you can't believe that, then I don't know what to tell you. That's what he says to William. And then William has to accept following a pirate. So Will's lie that pirates are bad is challenged, so much so that directly after the midpoint conflict, the truth of the lie is revealed, and it's like, wait a minute, my father was a pirate. Not all pirates are bad. Everything I believed is, boom, blown up. All right, let's talk about ends. After I talk about ends, I'm actually going to show you a real-time example of how to establish, in fact, there it is. All right, let me just, boop, okay. I'm going to show you a real-time example of how to basically set up something if you're just kind of like brainstorming, or if you run into a scene and you're like, how do I add conflict? How do I do whatever? I'm going to show you that, okay? All right. Resolution. Again, if you have any questions, please ask. I am happy to answer. And if you haven't done so already, please like the video. It helps the algorithm. All right. All ends, whether it's an act, a section, a plot point, or within a chapter, must be a resolution. It must bring the resolve to whatever the problem or conflict was in the middle. Okay? So it resolves their narrative world. All right? And when you're looking at the ends, the whole point of an end, and when you're writing the end of a chapter, the end of a scene, the end of your narrative, the end of an act, whatever the case is, your mind should be thinking, how do I resolve whatever was set up? Hey, Ro, what's up? Welcome to the show. Also, Ro, we're talking about stuff that we talked about a couple days ago. So this is fun stuff. So, again, when you're at the end of an act, a section, a plot point, a chapter, or a scene, your brain should be thinking about resolution. How do I resolve the problem or conflict created in the midpoint conflict? Excellent. Winkety-dink-doo. All right. If you're adding new information, if you're creating new conflicts, you're not necessarily moving resolution. Now, you might be saying, but Thomas, if it's Act 3, they have a final battle and there's more resolution. Yes, correct. But all conflicts come from cause and effect or pushback to resolve, but aren't new conflicts. Meaning, Act 1 sets up the ordinary world. The inciting incident creates the initial spark to the central conflict. The first half of Act 2 basically moves us through understanding that conflict, okay? Because by the end of Act 1, sorry, I don't have a drink today. By the end of Act 1, the protagonist's old world is completely collapsed, and they have to accept either completely, somewhat, or not at all the new world that they're walking into, which becomes Act 2. And now they're exploring their world through the conflict. Okay? By the midpoint conflict, they learn the truth of the lie, which is revealed, changes their entire position or perspective on what they thought the central conflict truly was, or what they were learning through the new world. And by the way, this shift in position will they will either completely agree with it, somewhat agree with it, or not agree with it at all. If they don't agree with it at all, they double down, and they're ultimately saying, I have to prove that my lie is true. And that's really what the finding a solution of the second half of Act 2 is, them trying to find a solution for either what the problem is that was discovered in the midpoint, or trying to prove that they're right even though they are wrong. Okay? But at the end of Act 2, the third act, or the end, is them accepting that they have the solution in hand, and that they're going to move forward and solve the problem of the midpoint conflict in Act 3. That means you cannot create new circumstances that have nothing to do with the midpoint conflict. But there can be challenges and conflict within Act 3, of course. For example, I don't know if you've ever seen Star Wars, small little independent film. Spoiler alert. Luke Skywalker they're like, hey, the Death Star exists. We have the plans for the Death Star. We have to go in and blow up the Death Star. That is Act 3, basically, right? And they say we have to blow up the Death Star, and this is how we do it. So everything is laid out in the beginning of Act 3, the context. And then they go, let's go do it. So the midpoint conflict of Act 3 is them fighting. They're fighting the Death Star. They're fighting fighters. They're trying to go through the ravine, whatever, and people keep getting blown up. Then Luke Skywalker, in the end of Act 3, basically, says, I'll do it. And he goes in, and he has his first time, and he misses, right? And then Vader comes in. Oh, my God, we've escalated, and it's the big final, right? And then Luke's like, all right, he's trying to use the computer. And then finally, Luke, use the Force, Luke. And he's like, oh, Ben, Obi-Wan. And then he closes the thing, and they're like, what are you doing? Why'd you shut the computer off? I'm gonna use the Force. Okay. And he shoots, and he blows it up, and Han Solo comes in, shoots Darth Vader's ship, and he goes, woohoo, get him, kid! And they blow it up. If you notice, not once in that situation, in Act 3, are they like, hey, it turns out this isn't the Death Star, and it's a hologram. And now we have to find out where the real Death Star is. Like, that doesn't happen. Act 3 is the end of either an act, a section, or plot point is always in the forward momentum to solve what we learned in the middle. That's it. If it isn't doing that, it is not truly an end, and you're just extending the middle. Okay? So keep that in mind. I hope that was helpful. All right. So William Turner's in the third, the resolution. William Turner accepts that pirates aren't inherently bad, because some are bad, but it's not that they're pirates. It's just some people are bad. And he risks his life to save Captain Jack Sparrow. Never heard of Star Wars? Yeah, it's a small little independent. All right. So let's go into the real-time breakdown. All right. I think I could actually shrink this a little bit so you could see it. I think this might be better. Yeah, I think that works. All right, so here's an example. All right, and by the way, this works. I'm going to show you how it works on the grand scale of acts, like Act 1, 2, and 3. The smaller scale of sections, which is us taking Act 1 and just breaking it down in 3. And then how we could take a section and break that down into plot points. Because remember, Act 1 is the grand scale. It's the macro. Sections are the mid-shot. It's going a little bit deeper. Plot points are the micro. It's the micro-analyzation of those narrative beats. With that said, we're going to set this up. All right? Beginning. setting up information on of the narrative to come. So the first thing we're going to do is they as in the protagonist is in love with their best friend. Their dream job is to work at Disneyland, and they hate cranberries. Okay, so off the bat, we know that the beginning needs to set that up. The beginning has to set up that the protagonist is in love with their best friend. It has to set up that their dream job is to one day work at Disneyland. And then, of course, they hate cranberries. All right? I'm gonna expand on this. I'm just going to break down what I have so far, though, okay? Now, the middle would challenge that, okay? Challenging the information of the narrative that has come. Okay? The best friend... Their best friend is, as in a process of falling in love with their cousin. Okay. I should say this. The protagonist's cousin. Okay. The protag gets a job at Disneyland, but as a janitor at night. Sucker. Okay. Now, to get accepted at their job, they have to drink cranberry juice. Okay, so how does this happen? All right. The protagonist is in love with the best friend. So what do we do with the middle? We need to challenge that. The challenge and reframe is that their best friend is falling in love with the protagonist's cousin. Okay. We are now putting a problem or conflict in the mix. It's important. Okay. The protag's dream job is Disneyland. Well, they get the dream job, but it's as a janitor at night, which might not be what their dream position was. Okay, it's challenging their understanding or how they look at things. Just in time, all stories have a beginning, middle, and end. That is correct. That is correct. Now, they hate cranberries, and the job is like, you know, like when you get hazed, or like, hey, to celebrate your... you're part of the team, welcome to the family. We're all going to drink cranberry juice. And, it's a stupid game where we just see who could drink, the biggest thing of cranberry juice fastest. And, the last person to drink has to do something stupid, right? And now they have to drink cranberry juice, and they're being forced to drink something they hate. So then you say, well, how do you resolve that? Well, the resolution is that they eventually tell their best friend that they love them. They eventually get a promotion to a position that'll lead to their dream job. And this is the important part. Your resolution in a full narrative should resolve the story at hand, but it should also point to the potential of future. All right? So the potential of future is that they will eventually have their dream job. They're now on the path to get their dream job. They don't always have to get exactly what it is they want. You do need to show the potential for results or a future. So this is about getting into your career field at the same time. That's right. Well, the main narrative probably would be they're in love with their best friend. Only because it's the first one. It's the most important. All right. But anyway, over the course, they end up learning that they actually love cranberry juice. Okay, so we resolve things. We show the potential for. Now, here's the interesting question. Just because they tell their friend that they love them, do they get them or not? We don't know. All right, so let's look at some things, okay? So that's the big narrative. This is what needs to be established in Act 1. This is what needs to be established in Act 2. And this is what needs to be established in Act 3. But let's look at it in sections, okay? The protagonist is in love with their best friend. So section 1 would be basically... oh, look. M-dash. It must be AI. No, it's Thomas AI. All right. So section 1 has to introduce the ordinary world before its disruption. So this would be he loves his best friend, but hasn't told her yet. Okay. Section 2 is the disruption of that ordinary world, which is the best friend meets the protagonist's cousin. Okay? And then section 3 is basically sitting in that world, and the best friend ends up going on a date. We use a date with the cousin, but the protag goes along thinking it's just three friends hanging out. Third wheel. All right. All right. I'm sorry. I'll do it like that. All right. So as you can see, now we're going into the mid of it. We're not in the micro of it. We are in the mid. Okay. This is Act 1 stuff. Okay. Or I should do this. Act 1. Okay. And this is Act 1. And this is Act 1. All right. So I'm actually going to do... I'm going to do this. All right. And then this is going to be section 1, just so we can shrink it down. So there's not a lot of words. Okay. All right. And we can get rid of this. Okay. So these are the main plot beats in Act 1. Okay. Those are the big pictures. That's the macro. The sections, okay, we're going a little deeper, okay? I'm not going to do all of them, but I'm going to show you. I'm just showing you the quick thing, all right? So these top ones are the macro. It's the big picture of what Act 1 would look like. We would set up the love, that the protagonist does love their best friend. We'll set up that they do want a dream job and that they hate. Now we have to figure out what that looks like on the page, and we set up section 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to explore that. We have plot point 1. Okay. Two and 3. All right. So here we go. All right. Plot point 1 would also continue to show their friendship. So the protagonist helps the best friend with a school project, but also, or a college project, and then makes them a gift for their for the best friend's best friend getting an A on their college test. All right, college test. Okay, so that would be we setting up the status quo. By the way, this is just for this emotional beat, which is the protagonist loves their best friend. We're just worried about that right now. Okay. Now we know plot point 2 is technically the middle. It is the conflict, right? So we have to now, since we set this up, we have to challenge that. We have established in plot point 1 that the best friend helps with the college project, blah, 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 right? The cousin calls up, and the protag videos during the project, during helping them, the best friend with the project. The cousin knows a lot about the subject and helps. Boom. Okay. And then what's the immediate reaction to that? The best friend asks if the best friend, having received the nice gift, asks the protag for the cousin's phone number just in case she has more questions. We all know, if you've ever watched a romance, don't do it, buddy. All right. Okay, so just as an example, if you notice, there are 3 setups as we go deeper. Every time we go deeper into the narrative or the process, we need to set something up. So the first act, we're going to set up the protagonist is in love with their best friend. So that means in section 1, we need to do something. We need to show that he loves his best friend but hasn't told her yet. So that's the closer look into it. Now, how do we go even closer to that? Well, we show their behavior. And we set up section 1, which is all about, by the way, section 1 is all about he loves his best friend but hasn't told her yet. That is because that is what needs to happen in section 1. So now we have to break that thing up, that narrative thing up, into 3 beats, a beginning, a middle, and end. And in this case, we set up the status quo. The protagonist helps the best friend with a college project, and then makes them a gift for their best friend getting an A. Actually, what we could do, this could go here. Okay. Because this would be the direct results, because it ended up, the protag gives the best friend a gift. For getting an A on their college exam. And the best friend, in turn, asks the protag for the cousin's phone number. Okay. I'm going to have to watch this a few times. Me too, sir. I assure you, Ro. I assure you. It's something that anyone would have to do. Trust me. All right. So we set up that the protag is helping the best friend with a college thing. So I'm thinking my book 5, I would need to introduce all the main protagonists of my series. Well, I mean, it's book 5, so you're already deep into the saga. What you need to do is each, but not necessarily the villains. Well, it depends. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish with that series. Just to understand, every book, all the players within that book need to be established within the first half of the narrative. That includes if the antagonist is brought into the narrative physically. However, if a narrative isn't, if the antagonist will not be brought into the narrative physically, but their presence exists, that would have to be established within the first half of the narrative of the book itself. Now, if you have new characters in book 2, that doesn't mean that you need to introduce them in book 1, if that makes sense. However, if I may, if you have a saga that is 5 books long, basically, any characters that are going to come in book, the second half of book 3, and then book 4 and 5, I would recommend somehow seeding them in the earlier books of 1, 2, and 3. And the only reason I say seed them is make note of them, make notice of them, make mention, maybe not by name, but of, history or whatever the case is. And the reason is because you have to look at the 5 books as the full arc of your complete saga, right? And at the end of the day, if book 5 comes out, right, and the main antagonist has never even been mentioned, it could be confusing because they're following your saga. It's like, here's an example. Imagine you're reading Game of Thrones, and let's assume he finished the series. But imagine you're reading Game of Thrones, and the White Walkers were never mentioned, ever. The only thing that's been focused on is Daenerys, and her dragons. And then the reader's thinking, oh, this saga is about Ice and Fire, the Song of Ice and Fire. So Jon Snow and the Stark family is ice, and she's the Targaryen, so she's fire. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, right? And then the last book of the series comes out, and it's all about the White Walkers. Readers would be like, where's the Daenerys? Why are they not? Shouldn't that be either Jon Snow is the villain or she's the villain, depending on how we conclude the story. So that's an example of not paying off things. But if you read what is literally the prologue of the first book, in the Game of Thrones, right? Or I should say, of A Song of Ice and Fire. They're north of the Wall, and they dealing with White Walkers. But then they seed all the White Walker stuff throughout all the books, and it will lead to something big. So you do have to think of your saga that way. And so depending on how many books it is, you have to be very conscious of that. For example, my epic fantasy, it is 3 series long, so they are self-contained series. And what that gives me the advantage of doing is I can let each series be its own thing, and then each series is sort of like a grander look into different POVs or a different perspective of things that happen. So doing the series allows me to focus all the information I need for that series to be concluded or self-contained. So that's something to think about too. If you're going to do a saga, and it's, I think you were saying, how many books you were saying? 12 books. So if you're doing a saga with 12 books, maybe it's really just, 4 smaller series that have 4 books, 3 books each, right? And now those 3 books could be self-contained if you really wanted to, and then it's just the next 3 books is just an extended look into maybe some time has passed and we're setting up a new series. Like, you could look at it that way too. But anyway, all right. So to conclude, what I'm talking about here is, as you can see, this would be what Act 1 setup, or what Act 1 needs to set up, is the whole protagonist is in love with their best friend. Section 1 would set up he loves his best friend but hasn't told her yet. Section 2 would challenge that, making it difficult for them to do it. The best friend meets the protagonist's cousin. That becomes a challenge or a problem or a conflict, because now the cousin is charming and, all these other things. And then we end Act 1 with the cousin and the best friend end up going on a date, which not only resolves the problem in a sense of forward momentum, but this officially disrupts the protagonist's world. And then you might be saying, well, how's it resolving it? Well, the resolution came when she said, hey, can I have the phone number just in case more information comes up? And then when the cousin actually meets them, the cousin and the best friend form a relationship. So their relationship is resolving forward, and the best friend didn't tell them they love them. So the lack of action is resolved into seeing a relationship forming between 2 people that the protagonist does care about, their best friend and their cousin. So now they're putting their life into a whole different world, which would lead to the best friend is falling in love during the whole second act. Okay? What we got here? Mine is more episodic, that are separated by arcs. Some follow the main characters. Oh yeah, that's really great storytelling too. When, like, let's say you wrote 10 books in a world, right? That works in a great way too, because readers don't have to feel like they need to read all the books. They can just pick up a book and just come in and start. It's like watching episodic, like you're saying. You could watch a television show like Law and Order and not be like, oh man, this is episode 33. What happened to the last 31 episodes? No, it's just procedural. Like, we know what's going on. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the top, and then we're gonna move on to the poll. Anyway. Okay, so if we go back here, whatever you set up in Act 1, okay, whatever it is, let's say, Mike hates cats. That means Act 2, like, let's say this is the central. Oh, it's this. Excuse my noob mentality. This is covering the context information as well. Yeah, we already did that. We did this up. We did it earlier in the episode, my friend. I assure you, it's all covered. It's all covered. You'll just have to watch it a little bit later. So let's, just to be silly, but at the same time, just to be simple, if Act 1 sets up that Mike hates, yeah, man, it's a good watch. It's a good watch. If Mike hates cats, how do we challenge that in Act 2? Okay, we could do literally anything as long as it places Mike in a position or a situation and circumstance that challenges his position, which is I hate cats. His position is I hate cats. So what can Act 2 be? Well, his sister is going away on a vacation, and he's going to watch her house filled with 5 cats. Okay? So now we are, Mike hates cats, and then we challenge that by putting him in a situation where he's going to watch 5 cats. What's the resolution? Well, it has to resolve the fact that he hates cats, and how do we fix that problem? And it has to give us a sense of potential future. There's a couple ways we could go with this because it's fake. It's all made up. A novel could be anything you want. He kills the cats. That can be it. Okay? And then his sister finds out. Which leads to the potential that their relationship is not going to heal. Let's go a different way. He ends up loving the cats. And his sister buys him a cat. Okay? The potential is he's going to raise a cat all his own. That's the potential. But the resolve is that he loves the cats. What's another? No, don't worry. We didn't kill the cat. We brought the cats back alive. What's another way we could go? Another way is the house catches fire, and Mike goes in and saves all the cats, but ends up blind from the fire and heat. I mean, it literally could be anything, right? But if you notice, we're resolving the problem that he has, and we did away where it was negative, where it was positive, and then where it's like he's doing it because he loves his sister and doesn't want her to come home to dead cats, but in doing so he goes blind in an act of selflessness, which is beautiful. But you know, of course, the hero sacrifices, right? There's a cost. So that's how you look at the things you set up. Mike hates cats. All right, so how are we going to challenge that? His sister is going away, and whatever. Shrink this. He watches. Okay, there you go. Watches her house. And that's how you have to look at your narratives when you're in a situation, whether it's a chapter, whatever. Like, let's say this was chapter 1. Let's say this was chapter 1, beginning, right? And then this is chapter 1, middle, all right? And then this is chapter 1, ending. It would be the same thing. Mike hates cats. We established that Mike hates cats. Okay. And let's say, since we know this is going to be later on, let's do this. Oh, what's going on? I'm making a mess on the screen, and I apologize. All right, let's just do that. Whoa. All right. So, if this is chapter 1, and we establish that Mike hates cats, okay, the challenge might be, because this would be still setting up the ordinary world, right? And Mike, Mike looks on the calendar and sees that his sister has a birthday coming up and doesn't want to go because she has 5 cats. Okay? Boop. What's going on? I know it looks like a mess. I'm sorry. I'm just doing this off my... Oh, freehand. Put this down here. I'm going to put this down here. All right. So, Okay. Mike hates cats in chapter 1 in the beginning. The middle is Mike looks on the calendar and sees that his sister has a birthday coming up and doesn't want to go because she has cats. That is the conflict, the problem. He's realizing, and that's not even the inciting incident. The inciting incident would be, turns out the sister's going to go away on vacation for her birthday. That is the inciting incident, which we would learn in plot point 2, which might be chapter 3 or whatever. Hey, Emma. Right? Now, how do we end the chapter? How do we end the chapter? Well, that's easy. Well, it's not easy. It's part of the process, right? How do we resolve this problem or thought? Well, Mike probably wants to get out of it. So, Mike calls up his neighbor and asks if he's still sick. And they are. So Mike goes over there and tells them to sneeze on him. Because Mike wants to get sick, okay? He's like, if I'm sick, I can't go to the birthday party. Okay. All right. Again, remember it's writing. You can do whatever you want. It's all silliness. But my point is, what you do is you set up a position or circumstance or status quo, which is Mike hates cats, okay? And this could be done by Mike hates cats. He changes the channel on the telly that has cats on it. Okay? All right? Okay? Hey, Emma. Hey, Emma. Do, 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 do. All right, so this sets up the chapter. And then this is basically he's done watching TV because everything he turns to happens to have cats. And then he looks at the calendar, and in fact, you know what? It's a cat calendar. And, to my loving brother, and it's January or whatever, and it says to my loving brother, a calendar that is perfect for you. Okay? So the sister knows that he hates cats. All right? And then he's looking at the January calendar, and it turns out on the 15th, it's her birthday. And he's like, crap, I don't want to go over there. She has 5 cats. And then we get to, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is how you look at narrative. You have to create the rhythm of set up circumstances, status quo, throw a wrench into it, put them in a position that challenges, or a circumstance that challenges the position established, or the circumstances established. And then you have to resolve it. The resolution should, at all costs, except for the very last beat of a narrative, resolve forward, meaning it's going to resolve, or at least they feel the potential for resolve, which in this case, if Mike can get sick from his neighbor, then he doesn't have to go. That's the potential for, right? That's the potential for. So he's like, oh, if I get sick, then I definitely don't have to go. So he found a solution in his mind to the problem of the chapter. Okay? And you could do this over and over again. Like you could look at section 1 and, on and on. We just kind of mentioned in this situation, he hates. This is what we basically said. We said he hates cats, and his sister's B-Day is coming up. That is plot point 1. Plot point 2, well, what do you think that is? Well, we said it earlier. Sister is going away for her B-Day. All right, and then he reluctantly says yes. Oh, actually, she asks him to watch the house. There you go. All right. So that's how you look at plot beats. You set it, plot point 1, you set up the circumstances of section 1, which is he hates cats and it's his sister's birthday. So that establishes the ordinary world and status quo. Then we challenge that. All right. He didn't want to originally go over on the birthday, but instead he finds out that the sister's actually going away for her birthday. And he might be like, that's great. Okay. Actually, it would be like this. And she asks him to watch the house, which in turn, the immediate response would be to say no, and then it turns out she can't find anyone. Okay? But the point is, you're always looking at beginning, middle, and ends. And whenever you come up with either an act or whatever the case is, a chapter, it doesn't matter. If we look down here, you want to always set up context. You want to set up who's in the scene, who's in that act, who's in that novel, whatever the case is. You're always trying to set up context so you could do what? So you can come to the middle and you could challenge it with a conflict. You could just push back on whatever it is you set up. As an example, as homework, if you want to practice this, okay? This is all you got to do. This is how you practice understanding narrative. This might not necessarily practice for when you're writing your full narrative or your full book, but if you want to practice the art of thinking like a writer, because remember, writing is easy. Sarah met Chris. But being a writer is about asking questions and serving the narrative. So this is an exercise to help you sort of look at things and then find whatever it is, a solution, a resolution, a problem, whatever. So you want to basically set up the circumstances, right? Positions, etc. Okay? And then you want to challenge those circumstances and positions, okay? Which is ultimately a conflict or problem. Oh, I just write conflict. All right? Or I could do this. I don't want to go to that. Okay. And then, son of a bitch. And then resolution forward. How they find a solution. Okay. All right. So the homework that really works out is think of a situation or circumstance. It could be literally anything. A dog is left behind at a park. That's right. Dog is the POV. That's right. Writing is writing. You can literally do anything you want. In fact, a talking dog is left behind at a park. You know why? Because it's writing. It's fake. It's all fake. Okay? You can do literally anything you want. So there are no mistakes when it comes to figuring things out. All right? Now, we have this. If this is the setup, I'll put colors on it so you can have a visual. So you can have a visual. Everybody. All right. So this is the setup. All right. So while we're here, in the comments section, why don't you tell me how we could challenge or create a problem because the dog, how the circumstance of the dog is left behind at the park. And the reason that's not considered a conflict yet is because that is setting up the circumstances and the status quo. We are starting at being left behind in the park. So how do we challenge those circumstances and maybe the dog's position of wanting to get home? Okay? So, you tell me in the comments. Let's see if we can come up with something as an exercise. We'll do it together, okay? I'll give you all a second. And while I'm doing that, for anyone who doesn't want to participate but likes polls, what slows your narrative when you don't mean it to? We have many choices. We have 9 votes yet today. We have too much setup, context, wandering thoughts, dialogue drags. Interesting, 0 on that so far. Descriptions for description's sakes. Ooh. All right, there we go. Anyone have an idea of what we can do? Remember, it's all fake. It's all made up. We're writers. You can literally come up with anything. Okay? Aliens show up. Another family finds them and takes them. Okay? Oh, here we go. A mime wants to talk to the dog using sign language. Okay, that's fine. A mime wants to talk to the dog using sign language. Okay. Now, here's the question, though. We said the dog, it's a talking dog, right? Is this dog able to talk to other dogs or people? I'm going to say the dog can talk to anybody. So a mime wants to talk to the dog using sign language, or it should be a mime talks. Let's be a little bit more proactive. What do we got here? Oh, hello, CS. Welcome to the show. A stray dog tries to challenge his view of wanting to go home. Ooh. All right, Ro. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to switch this up. That's actually really, really good. Stray dog tries to challenge his the protag's dog view of wanting to go home. Very good. Very good. All right. It is. The reason is because we get to put agency. We get to put agency, and also it's narratively potent. It has, connected to it. The dog has Alzheimer's and forgot he can talk. I love that idea. That's a funny idea, but that might be something that's a little bit more. Maybe that's Act 2. Maybe we realize that's something that's explored. Is that the dog? I'm still just trying to get this whole thing. Me too, Ro. I'll be honest with you. I'm still trying to work it, and I've been doing it for a while. We're always learning. We're always learning. Let me do this so we could insert. I broke it. Boop. All right, now we need a resolution. So because this is the conflict or problem, what is the protagonist? Oh, I should just do this. The dog. Okay, so now, come on, let's get some ideas for a solution. The solution, just for anyone who's listening, needs to be directly connected to the problem. So in this situation, we wouldn't have a mime coming over to talk to the dog in sign language, only because A, that would create a new problem and is not working to resolve the problem that we have created. Remember, all endings, all resolutions need to resolve the problem or focus on resolving the problem, even if it just adjusts or reframes that problem so it can move the narrative forward. Okay, so let's see from the audience, what do we got for a solution to a stray dog tries to challenge the dog's view of wanting to go home? And again, CS, excellent. I don't know if this is your first time here, but appreciate the input. So we have a talking dog is left behind at a park. Dog is the POV, wanting to get home. A stray dog tries to challenge the dog's view of wanting to go home. So how do we resolve that? Any ideas? I'm happy to just give the idea, but maybe we're just trying to give everybody a second. I don't know how much the delay is on the video. I know that there is a delay, so I'm happy to. You know how it is. You know how it is. All right. Okay. So if we're not gonna have any suggestions, let's keep it going. A stray dog tries to challenge the dog's view of wanting to go home. Okay. The resolution is that the protagonist decides to try. Oh, we got something. The dog who wants to go home asks the other dog for his bus fare. Let's think about that for a second. The dog who wants to go home asks. What we got here? The stray dog takes the talking dog on a tour around the city to see sights he's never seen. SB, that's a really good idea. That would be more of like section 2. That would be like a section 2 or an act 2. Because now we get to go into the new world of exploring the world that is not their old home. We're in a micro moment right now. We're sort of dealing with a micro moment. As you can see, we got to also, when you're working on narrative, you got to keep relevance too, like the relativity of the situation. So this is a talking dog is left behind at the time. A stray dog talks to the challenge, right? So it's it's more intimate. It's a softer moment. You know, this is probably a scene, if you know what I mean. Since that dog obviously doesn't care about going home, he won't need his best. That is true, Ro. That is true. Well, let's work that out. Let's talk that out. So the protagonist goes, hey, I don't want to go anywhere but home. So do you have bus money? And then the dog goes, no, I'm a dog. And then the other dog goes, yeah, but we're both talking dogs. You think we could at least earn some money as a dog? Now, what are we doing? We're creating a new problem, okay? And if we're creating a new problem, we're not creating a resolution with forward momentum. So remember, all endings need a forward momentum. To ask for money might lead to a solve of the, however, these are dogs. They don't even have pockets. The stray dog wants to show why humans are evil, perhaps show what they did to him, maybe even mock the loyalty the protag dog has to humor. CS, that's fantastic. But again, that is a bigger picture. That is another thing that could be explored in Section 2 of Act 1. That's something that could be explored in Act 2 itself. Why? Because that is sitting within the problem. That is reframing the entire position of why you shouldn't go home. So remember, you got to keep it relative to the moment. If this is a scene, we're not going to write a scene that explores those elements yet, because that would be the pacing would be too aggressive, right? In this situation, interesting, got it. Yeah, and what you're coming up with is great thinking, by the way. And by the way, Ro, you too, like coming up, hey, let's get money. But you have to think relative to the size of the scene, the chapter, the act, the section, the plot point, all those things. And then you got to think relative to what's established. Yes, it is a talking dog that's left behind at the park. But if they had pockets or money or understood money, that would have to be established in the beginning. But it is not relevant to the solution of a stray dog tries to challenge a dog's view. If the resolve is give me money, I just want to go home on the bus, it is not solving the problem that was established, which is the stray dog tries to challenge the dog's views. You cannot, if you know what I'm saying, like, no, I just want to go home, give me money. All right? We're not resolving that problem. They're ignoring it and creating a new problem, which is I need money to get home. And that would be a different scene or a new chapter or another part of the story. Okay? The dog who wants to go home explains why he should go home too. The other dog. Well, there we go. So the protagonist says that home life is where I have all the warmth, food, and love that I want. Plus, my owners, my family will miss me. So we want the stash dog to ask why. They don't necessarily have to ask why, but the solution would be this is an example. It's now the protagonist says that home life is where I have all the warmth, food, and love that I want. Plus, my family will miss me. Now, this I would actually probably lean more towards this, and the reason I do that is because this is just the conversation that is the debate of the conflict. You see, we have to remember to follow the rules. If it is supplying the conflict or exploring the conflict or developing the conflict / problem, it is middle stuff. Oh, here we go. Maybe talking dogs. Tummy rumbles and he realizes maybe talking dogs. First of all, Sean, excellent comment. Excellent comment. Maybe talking dogs tummy rumbles, and he realizes the streets are hard to find food. All right, Sean, that is a fantastic idea. That is not a resolution to the problem at hand. However, that's something that could be explored in chapter 2. It could be explored in section 2. It could be explored in act 2. But what we're talking about is the beginning needs to set up context, which is it's a dog that was left behind at a park, and it just so happens it talks. The conflict to that is a stray dog says, hey, you're in a good place. You don't want to go home. This is great. And the protagonist is like, no, I do want to go home. It's warm there, and there's food there, and, plus my family will miss me, right? Good thinking, Sean. He can ask if they can get food if he helps him get home. All right. So now, Ro, now you're talking. So watch this. We're gonna do a double shot. Now we can actually use Sean's idea because it is a counter that is resolved. So stray dog says that food is scarce out here, so stick with me. And the protagonist that if the stray dog get home, he'll make sure his family feeds him and gives him warmth. All right, what we got here? The stray says, well, if they gotta miss you, they forget you. Oh, why? That's funny. That would also be in conflict. So if they're going to miss you, why'd they forget you? By the way, M, that is fantastic as a conflict. That is a philosophical question that could be explored in the full narrative, because you know what? Maybe they didn't leave the dog behind. They left the dog. And the lie, see how we're developing the narrative by just brainstorming? The lie is this, that the dog believes the family will miss them, and that it is home and it's warm there, and that he has to get home to his family, only to find out in the midpoint conflict that they actually left the dog at the park, which changes their whole plan. Do you see how we develop narratives and how we look at it? I know, right? But that is the power of narrative. You have, even in a scene, this is just a scene. We are just building a scene. All right. And by exploring ideas and understanding what is set up, what is challenged, and what is resolved, it allows us to figure out. Thank you, Ro. Oh, yes. Thank you. It allows us to sort of look at how to develop those scenes, or a chapter, or an act, or a section, right? You should do more videos like this. Maybe I will. We got 2026 coming up. I'm going to need ideas. But my point is, let's say we want to build more on the setup, right? For example, we'll even go back to Rose saying have money, right? I know that they wouldn't have money, so the dog doesn't have money, okay? Or resources, or know how to survive in the wild. Okay, those would be set up things. That's all beginning chapter scene stuff. Okay, these 3 beats for the challenge all challenge the setup. A stray dog tries the challenge. Oh, actually, we should be more proactive. A stray dog challenges the dog's view, protagonist, of wanting to go home, on their desire to go home. Okay? And then this is the protagonist challenging the problem. The protagonist says that home life is where I have all the warmth, food, and love that I want. This also sets up Act 1. it is what they're trying to go home to. Okay? And it's also saying these are the things they need, which means they might not get home right away. And Act 2 would let us explore the dogs living in the stray dogs world, where the stray dog's like, hey, we're not getting to where you got to go by the end of the night, so let me take care of us tonight. We'll eat, I'll show you around, and then in the morning, and that's Act 2, by the way. The whole Act 2 could just be overnight and them trying to survive and have fun, and then whatever the case is. Or maybe the first half of Act 2 is them overnight surviving and the stray dog showing them the life away from family and all these things. And then, the midpoint is them getting home, discovering that, the family actually left the dog there and it wasn't by accident. So then the second half of Act 2 is about finding a solution to that problem, which is, did they really just leave me? Did they really not want me? Was I not loved? And it's them trying to find themselves. And you know what? Act 3 might be them proving or discovering a new life alongside the stray dog in that world. And that, but now we challenge that, right? People, oh, you're an undocumented dog, or you have a leash, or somebody takes the dog, whatever. You can do whatever you want. Yeah, they like them damn cockapoos. Who doesn't like a cockapoo? Just figured if he talks, who knows what else he could do. Well, yeah, but you have to, again, just to be clear, Ro, when you're doing this exercise, okay, if I didn't have this here, the problem has to challenge what is actually written. That's the exercise. We cannot make up new information, because if you did in the story, would the reader be confused or would they understand what's going on? And the answer is they would be confused. The beginning sets up the context for the reader to understand the who, what, where, when, and how of the scene, the chapter, the section, the plot point, or the act. So the exercise is to come up with things that directly challenge what we know in the setup, and then the resolution must resolve what the problem is. But more importantly, keep this in mind, everybody. If you do come up with some conflicts that wasn't set up originally, then you have to do what I just did and make sure you can set up something. You can just go back and you just add the information. Like, for example, let's say the talking dog also has a cut on their paw. So the setup is the dog is limping. So you might say, but Tom, isn't the dog limping because they have a cut, the conflict? No, because anything you set up in the beginning becomes the status quo, the circumstance, or, in this situation, the context. The dog could be having 3 legs and missing a leg. That is just context. But if you want the dog, the talking dog has a cut on their paw and it hurts bad. Okay? So we're challenging the dog is limping. The context is the reader's reading the book and it just says that the dog is limping around. Then we learn that it is actually a cut on their paw and it hurts badly, okay? So that elevates the stakes and that challenges the setup of information. It is the Lady and Tramp reboot. The stray dog asks, but if they left you at the park, will they really miss you? Debs, that's really great. We actually have that there. We have, if they're going to miss you, why'd they forget you? Excellent. But anyway, all right. So that's the exercise for you to work on. But remember the rules, okay? Everything in the beginning must set up circumstance, positions, ultimately context. That is the rule of setup. That means you wouldn't challenge anything yet. You wouldn't resolve anything yet. You would, whatever information is needed in the scene, the chapter, the act, whatever it is that you're going to challenge in the middle, it must be set up in context first, or the readers will be confused. Now, again, if you're coming up with things like this, where you come up with an idea and you go, this would be an interesting conflict, and it's not in the setup, you then have to go back and seed the setup. So that is how you build scenes and how you build narrative, is you're allowed to come up with things that aren't necessarily there. But if you do so, you have to go back and set it up. Because in reality, here's the truth. Let's say we don't have this. Okay? Let's say the dog is limping is not in the opening. And the dog talking has a cut on their paw and it hurts really bad. It just so happens in the middle of the scene, the dog is limping now. The dog just started limping, and it turns out the dog has a cut. And you might say, but Thomas, can't we have him step on glass? Sure. But then this isn't necessarily the solution anymore, because the cut becomes the conflict. But really, the conflict is, this is an emotional conflict, right? We're challenging a position. The conflict is just the desire to go home. Okay? Barely, but not bleeding. Okay? Which we know is going to slow down the dog, which, by the way, that is seeding the potential for they're not going to be able to get home by the end of the night, so they're going to have to spend the night surviving. So, everything kind of seeds in there. I have a feeling I'm going to do a lot of my assignment wrong. It's not necessarily that, if you're doing this homework or whatever, that you're doing it wrong. It's just that you're learning, So you're going to have cause and effect. You're going to have trial and error. But at the end of the day, the rule stands. Set up whatever it is you need to. Literally just challenge what you set up. Okay? And then resolve what you challenge. Resolve the problem while moving the plot forward. Okay? This moves the plot forward because he's like, why don't you help me and I'll get you some food? And he's like, yeah, sure. If you're going to get me food and warmth, I'll help you get home. No problem, buddy. Okay? But now chapter 2 might show something else happening. Or maybe the paw is starting to hurt too much. And they're like, we're not going to make it home tonight, so we should try something else, right? So you got to think like that. You got to think in narrative movements and beats. I'm just saying. All right. Oh, it's 1:30. All right. We've been doing this for 90 minutes. Let's move on to the. Oh, what do we got here? It's all good as long as I can see what I did incorrectly to not make the same mistakes again. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the part of learning that is absolutely essential. You have to mess up. That's just part of the process of learning. But that's what I'm here for, especially for anyone out there. Obviously, if you want to do examples in the comments after the video goes public, because this is live. But if you want to do examples of the homework in the comments, I'll be happy to respond to those comments and give you some insight, maybe some adjustments and or direction. I don't care. This is what the channel's about. It's about helping writers, and it's about a writer's community. It's about, talking about craft. It's about elevating ourselves and understanding. But at the same time, please let me know how the exercise works for you. If you don't want to leave a comment about that, showing the homework results, just keep me up to date. Let me know what's going on. If it's helping you with your scenes, if it's helping you with your acts, whatever the case is, I would love to hear that. With that said, let's talk about the what slows down your narrative when you don't mean it to. And we have too much setup, context, wandering thoughts, dialogue drags, and description for description's sake. We have 10 votes. Excellent. And as we say in this place, we have 10% on too much setup. We have 30% on wandering thoughts. We have 0% on dialogue drags. And we have 60% on descriptions for description. We're going to end the poll. Boom. All right. We got a comment. We got a comment. What we got here? See, I learned something here. I've never thought of going back to seed the setup. Kudos, Thomas. You are welcome, M. You are welcome. Yes, you can go back and seed anything you want. If you're in Act 3 and you're like, that's the solution, right? This is how it should end. Write it. Even though you might not have talked about it at all in the book. But what do you have to do now? You got to take whatever it is you created, and you have to go back and seed it from Act 1 into Act 2 into the beginning of Act 3 and earn the results. All right, but let's talk about this. So, description for description's sakes, 60% is what slows down your narrative when you don't mean it to. 100%. Absolutely. Description for description's sake is the killer of movement. Description for description's sake, if we are to define it, is whenever it's description outside of the POV's emotional experiences or choices. So it's if we stop the narrative completely and just simply describe the castle. Or worse, you have the protagonist walking through the castle just so you can describe the castle, but narratively it is doing nothing to develop the character as a character, or is it moving the plot forward? It is just like, I want the audience to see what the... Because in reality, if you're going to describe a room or a castle, allow it to move through the emotional experiences and your choices, because that will earn the description and the word count. When it comes to wandering thoughts, I agree with this. I agree. This is a good, tight second place, 30%. Pontificating. You know, just sitting there in expositional kind of wonderment definitely slows down the narrative in a sense of why are they wondering? How is it reflective? This is also something I would lean into. Well, not lean into. This is something I would connect to flashbacks. You know, when you're writing flashbacks, that could be wandering thoughts. If the flashback stops the narrative just to explain something, or the flashback is just lingering on and not necessarily adding anything to the narrative forward, it's the same thing with wandering thoughts. Too much setup. Yes. Setup is so important, though. Let me just clarify. Setup, or I should say context, is king. Without context, you cannot understand what's going on. It is confusing. It is weird, right? Things are just happening. We don't know why. Sorry, I just can you? Yes, Afghani. I will start over completely, and let's see. We're gonna. You know what I'm noticing? I'm noticing the names are not. It's not showing like your written names. It's just showing like your username. That's fine. Anyway, what I'm saying is when it comes to too much setup, context is king. You need it. Without it, the reader's confused. But there is too much setup. Just as there is too much conflict, just as we are taking too long to resolve this. Sometimes I get the question, I think we've talked about it on here. I'll just summarize it. But, you know, how long should a chapter be? And I always say the same thing. A chapter should be as long as it needs to be to accomplish what a chapter needs to do. It needs to set up a problem or a situation or a scenario, circumstances, status quo. It needs to challenge that with a problem in the middle, and then it needs to resolve it. So the beginning should be long enough to set up the circumstances or the status quo. The middle should be long enough to challenge that opening, that status quo, enough to have characters at least consider changing their position somewhat, completely, or not at all. If they don't change at all, they usually double down, meaning like, no, the Jets are the best, which we all know they are not. But the resolution should be long enough to solve the problem and move the narrative forward. So if it's too much in any area for that, it is considered fluff, lingering, slow pace, drag, slag, boring. All right, it's drudgery. If it is too little, that will create an extremely fast pace. It wouldn't have enough information. It would be confusing. We wouldn't be able to follow it. So there is a nice middle area that you're looking for where you set up just enough context where it all makes sense. Because I believe in vague but informative, where you explain enough to answer the questions that create clarity, but you leave it vague enough so the reader also has questions, which creates what? Intrigue. Anyway. All right. With that said, let's do let's do the real. Oh, I did some. Just so you know, I have a book available on makearightlefthehere.com. That's my website. Do you have what it takes to make a right left here? Do you punk? But I just got to chapter 13 in the second draft of this book. I am flying through on the edits of the second draft for the 27 plot point outline. This is a book on how to use the 27 plot point outline, but it is also if you're not an outliner, you're more of a pantser. It goes deep into narrative understanding. So the stuff we talked about today, it goes deep into that. It goes deep into what certain beats within a narrative needs. So if you're writing from the cuff of your pants, this book actually tells you things you should be looking for, even if you're not thinking about it in the beginning, but things you should be thinking about when you're rereading your book, taking notes, or even when you're working on a scene. Additionally, Death of the King, my epic fantasy, is available currently on Patreon only. It is per chapter. It is the scribe tier, and it allows you not only to see the book and the chapters, but I educate you on the process. I talk about why or how I wrote the chapter. I give you lessons, and I show you how to take what I talk about in that post, how to use it in your own narratives. But more importantly, you get to see the short form outline, the extended outline, the zero draft outline, the first draft, and then, of course, the third draft. So you get to see the stages of all the chapters. So anyway, if you're interested, make a right left here. You can check out the website and look at all the books from how to outline to how to be successful in your career to enjoying some epic fantasy. And if you haven't done so, please bloop the beard, bloop that like button. Definitely helps the channel. What we got here? Buy stuff. Buy stuff. Hey, Emma, welcome back. Yes, can you start over for me too? Thanks. Emma, for you, I would start over any way you need me to. Really, that's how we help one another, you know, because sometimes we rush through it and it's like, no, that isn't what we need. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk it piece by piece and work it out. So yeah, sure. Let's get back to it. So everything needs a beginning, a middle, and no, just kidding. Is that it? Oh, we could do, you know what we could do real quick? Because we still got a little bit more time. If anyone has any questions or about what we... if you have any questions about what we talked about today, or you have questions about your own narrative, or you need help with anything specific, feel free... I try. Feel free to ask questions right now. I have a couple minutes before I have to go. So if maybe I'll answer one or two, maybe even 3 questions. Feel free to. If you don't feel like asking a question, remember you could always come back and leave a comment, and that's how we do it here. I have a question about what we talked about today. What did we talk about today? You know, Afghani, that's a great question. And if I was to tell you, I would say, why don't you just rewind the video and give me your time again? And, it's another 2 hours of watch. I really appreciate it. I have a question. Sounds like we all want you to cancel your Saturday plans for us. It does sound like it, but, I could probably leave my beard to do the lesson, and then I could go relax. I don't know. I almost shaved the beard off today, just so you know, for anyone who doesn't care. Trimmed it. I almost trimmed it. Anyway, I guess that's it. If no one has questions. Oh, what do we got here? Does it count as 2 hours watch if I do it in X2 speed? I don't think so. I don't think it does. Maybe. No, I don't think it does. No. Don't worry. I'm trying to grow it back. I'm trying to get it going. I used to have a really long beard, and I used to braid it all the time, like a Viking. Well, a Sicilian Viking. But I'll tell you, one time I was sleeping and I woke up and I was just like, oh, what is that? And I'm like slapping my chest in the dark. I was like, what is that? It was just my beard woke me up. I thought something was crawling on me. I just want to point that out. That we have struggles, okay? We have struggles, all right? Also, just so you know, because Flowers is missing us today, she's out doing stuff. For the rewatch that she's here, maybe we could show her some love and let her know that we missed her, because we do. We miss Flowers. She'll be here tomorrow, but I just want her to know that we love her so much. And if she's doing a catch-up watch and watching this, and she gets to see this, I just want her to know that we love you, and thank you for always supporting and celebrating. And I'm so glad you're out doing what you're doing. But at the same time, we miss you. We miss you. This was a lot of fun and eye-opening. Thanks so much for the wisdom. Hey, anytime, CS. If you don't know, I do a live Saturday, Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow, every Sunday, I do a Write a Book with Me series where I write the book on the screen and I break down what I'm doing. I show you my process. You see it all in real time. It's none of this where you just see me doing this. No, it's on the screen. You could ask questions during the process. It's a lot of fun. We all dance and sing. It's a crazy time. So that's available. And every Saturday I do craft videos like we did today, and or we talk business about the industry. Missed you, flowers. When will you be back? Maybe tomorrow. Hi, flowers. Hi, flowers. Boom, 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 boom. We love you, flowers. Yeah, we do. We love you, flowers. We love you. You should do it in stop motion for those of us. Listen, that's fair. You know, if you actually going back to the 2-speed, you could go down. You could slow it down to a half speed, and that'll help. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much, Thomas. Rad stuff. I appreciate it, Ro. I appreciate it. Oh, M. By the way, you're still reading the Patreon. And I just want you to know, if you have questions or anything, or if you want to add comments to the post, you have thoughts or whatever, please do. You know, I'll respond to it. It is not just a read and a dump and read. It's a class. So anything that will help you, you could reach out and ask me. You could do it on Patreon. You could do it through email. It doesn't matter. I'm here, buddy. I'm here. Thanks very much. Very helpful info. Oh, hey, anytime, Sean. And thanks for the input. I assure you, it's always appreciated. And that's the whole point. Is like, let's go back and forth. But again, like you heard me, every Saturday and Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live videos. So if you have questions or anything, you could always join in the live, ask those questions. It doesn't even have to be relevant to what I'm working on, but it does need to be for either the profession of writership, authorship, screenwriting, whatever, or craft itself. Slow it down and hear Thomas teach you while drunk. If you watch, is it the 2025? Yeah, maybe it's the 2025 videos series. The videos for this year, I think I did a thing where I'm like, every time I say resonates, take a drink, and I would take a drink. No, I think that was 2024. Every video that I released in 2024, I was like, resonates. Oh, time to take a drink. Because that's like that. That's like the writer's, the word. It's like, you need it to resonate. I tried to stop using that word because I used it all the time. I was like, no more resonate. I used it so much, I was noticing that I was saying resonate for so much in my videos, like, because I write out my scripts, that I was just like, I said it again. Honestly, we're drunk. We are drunk with power. Unlimited power. Oh, all right. I don't have a drink. I don't got anything today. I ran out of water because where I live, you can't drink the water out of the faucet because it's poison, basically. So the delivery is late. It's not coming till Tuesday. So I'm thirsty. Yes, I am still reading. Yeah, will do. Other things going on. Obviously. I know that. I just want you to know you are not imposing on me, because I know sometimes it can be like, I don't want to take a lot of his time, but I assure you, I'm just letting you know that you are not imposing on me, and that I'm here to help in other ways too. I'm always a conversation away, my friend. Other than that, I guess is there anything else? No, Thomas is just vibing. Let's get a round of applause for that. Thank you. As my father always says, you can't tell people you are something, but if people tell you are something, accept it. Don't tell them no. So I'm not gonna say you're wrong. I'm not gonna say you're right. I appreciate the kind compliment. The eccentric. Yeah, I would agree with that. Much live long and prosper. Drunk, yeah, party time. It's party time. Excellent. What's going on with the names? I was just saying it earlier. What is going on with the names? Let me see what's going on with the names. Let me ask the YouTube. Why are the names gone on YouTube and only the usernames show up on the live? Let's see. We're going to answer the question in real time. YouTube is now showing usernames, or handles as they're called, instead of display names in live chats to combat impersonation and spam, because handles are unique identifiers that cannot be duplicated. This change is part of a broader implementation across YouTube to make it easier to identify authentic creators and is being rolled out gradually, similar to how handles are used in comments and shorts. This is to prevent impersonation. It's to improve to enable future features. The move to handles is also a step towards enabling new features, such as allowing mobile users to easily tag other chat participants. Interesting. Oh my dickhead. Let's see. What does my name show up as? Let's see. Hello. Oh, the right. Well, yeah, because that's my username. The right mind. Oh, interesting. So it's because I'm on my phone. Well, it's saying that it's trying to do it for lives in general, but that's weird. But what are you gonna do? Technology, am I right? All right, my friends. I think we've reached the end of the live because my throat is about to go. I finished reading Foundation's Edge. Oh yeah? How was it? On a scale of 1 to 2, did you like it or not like it? We don't like judging too harshly here. By the way, I don't know if I told anyone. I'm gonna be doing a video on this, and I'm gonna be doing it specifically on the what's it called? On this chapter, Casualties. I'm gonna do a breakdown. I'm going to do a breakdown on Casualties, the chapter. I'm not going to read the chapter, but I'm going to show the chapter on the screen, and I'm going to break it down. I'm going to talk about the narrative things and stuff like that. So that should be fun. I'm still working on if I'm going to do a pre-record on that or a live. We'll see. A 2, excellent. It is a to buy. The show did not do justice to the books. Well, ain't that the truth for most things? See you tomorrow, SP. Yeah, because we're getting ready to go. There's actually very little in common between the show and the books. Now you sound like you're talking about the Rings of Power. Oh, and the Wheels of Time. But I'm glad you read it. I'm glad you liked it. It's always good to read stuff, right? The Foundation's Edge. Look at that. That's a big book, though. You know, isn't it a philosophical book? What is that? It's a science fiction novel by American writer. Oh, yes. This came out in 1982 for anyone who's young like me. I am not young anymore. I'm young and naive. Okay. Anyway. All right. Let's do it. Past of them spying on us. Probably. They're always spying. Everybody's spying. With that said, though, I do have to go. It is time for me to... I got to eat breakfast, a lunch or whatever. It's 4 o'clock. Much love to everybody, really. I will see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm Thomas J. Bellezza. And as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye!